I am NetMoverSitan. Now that I've made a start of the lore of Soulblight, specifically that of the Soul Tree in the Sanctuary, this time I shall be covering one of the factions in that world, the more secular authority known as the Empire. Let's start with the history of the Empire, based on what is known from Item lore. Sorry, I'm unable to create a more exact timeline as there's not really a dating system, but a general idea is that it was founded sometime after the Soul Tree spawned humans, and they created civilization as a concept. Then the Sanctuary was built around Soul Tree, without the understanding that plants need sunlight. The ignorant. Technology advanced over the centuries, and the ties between the Empire and the Church strengthened. At least until Adder was used in technology and it was revealed how it was created. This resulted in the Empire and the Church fighting against each other quite violently. The Empire was ruled by an emperor, obviously, along with a number of noble clans who did his will, and other things that he couldn't be everywhere at once to deal with. Either that or he considered them beneath him. This is the reality of an autocratic way of government. You need others to do things for you, and as long as they keep doing that and aren't planning open rebellion against you, that's all that matters. Another reality is that an autocratic government is only as strong as the one on top, which can make succession a troublesome time as you don't really know what you'll end up with. The first to renounce the church was one of the noble clans, who used the spider as their coat of arms. The shield, this crest, is all that remains of them. Why did they die out? Were they wiped out sometime after the event by the Empire, after the true history of it was lost, by the Church as casualties of war, by the pirate brood, by disease, one thing that has no preference to birth or merit, age or gender? We might never know for sure, but one thing that is certain is that the pirate brood was active even at that point, as a legend was made when the third Targaryen sergeant fought against a pirate and died. Not sure if he survived or not, or whether the pirate that he fought survived or not, but he made a legend out of it. Whether it be some kind of last stand or a heroic victory, all that matters in the end is the legend was made. The Empire used the rising sun as a symbol, specifically with the Emperor's First Regiment, symbolizing the dawn of a new era. This new era likely being the separation of church and state. It's unknown if this was before or after the event, but what is certain is that the event happened, which set civilization back by centuries, where once there was a proliferation of technology-augmented weapons in a steampunk Victorian society. It's now back to the Middle Ages, where blacksmiths made weapons once more. Where silver used to be plentiful, it's now comparatively rare. I believe that Albert Einstein, that scientist with Asperger's syndrome, who developed the theory that resulted in the land of the rising sun, get the kind of heat that none should be close to. Not without death, anyway. He once said that World War IV would be fought with sticks and stones. Although a little off, those words aren't off by much, and applied to this situation. Another historical event that's not that clear if it was before or after the event is a war between the Empire and the tribes of the Southern Lands, which used primitive tools for surgery, much like the NHS when they make cutbacks. Their golden idols were melted down into golden axes as souvenirs. One of these was then wielded by a bloke with a beard wearing a horned Viking helmet. Sorry, going off topic again. I made that last bit up. And besides, the horned Viking helmet is a Victorian invention. Yet, considering that they're melting down golden idols, implies that there was a religious significance to this. If it was before the event, it was before the schism between church and state. If it was after the event, it was likely sometime when they reconciled their differences. Sorry, got a bit distracted by going off topic twice in as many minutes. Right, let's just move on. Most likely after the war concluded in the Empire's favour, Togurian nobles fell in love with the southern delicacy, a sweet and aromatic snack, when it was first brought to them by the southern tribes. Much like the Crusades during the medieval period, resulted in a number of more exotic food items and spices being introduced to the nobility of Europe. Certainly the knights. They needed to eat at some point. The southern seas were known to have pirates operating, so those expecting the sea to be a place that the roguish type would avoid, they were gravely mistaken. Here's something else that reinforces the possible religious motivation of the war between the Empire and the Southern Lands. There were known to be witches there, which used rattling utensils, and not the kind used in Latin American music, although that can be quite bewitching as well, just not in the same way. If it was before the event, then the Empire was likely there to burn the witches as heretics, as at least Christian organisations did in these circumstances, although fire was more widely used as a spiritual cleanser in other places, and not just in Europe. Stop going off topic! Sorry. I need to compare the two worlds, and sometimes I go overboard. In fact, it also applies post-event, doesn't it? As the anti-church sentiment probably died down after a couple of centuries, might even need just 1 century. There was a story of 2 brothers who went to sign a treaty with the southern regions. Among the feasts that they consumed was Banetis mushroom soup, which poisoned them. Eating a Bametis mushroom saved at least the one that found it. although it's unclear if he went to save his brother by giving him another Bamessus mushroom. How this works? My theory is it might be much like it does in real-life medicine, where one mushroom had a lethal toxin and the other mushroom had an antitoxin, one which counteracted the toxin that was in their system at the time. One was acidic, the other was an alkali. Well, at least that's the theory. What does matter in the end is eating that got rid of what was in their system that was killing them. Well, at least with one of them. Don't know about the other. There was also a Great Famine, during which a person who stole a loaf of bread was not judged as a thief. They were probably judged as a traitor instead, as that is the food of the people, or at least those who can afford it. Yeah, it's technicals here now. There is at least one emperor that was named. He was known as Emperor Schafrenbram. He favoured a spear with a high voltage module, which would incinerate the nervous system of those that have one in a split second. Well, at least it would be quick. It'd make the electric chair look like a sandwich toaster. Yeah, I made a remarkably deadly weapon sound like a kitchen appliance. How twisted is that? It's unclear if this next one was either an emperor, noble, or great general, but Felix von Schaffenbraun was known as the Great Unifier, who, like some nobles, was willing to satisfy any desires, even the desire for the addictive properties of black steel, even knowing the deleterious effects it has. Some noblemen were sadists, wearing armour crafted to inflict the most harm up close. The highborns of the Empire, who were most devoted to the Church, received a weapon that boasted great damage and great defense to distant attacks, but at a great cost that they were willing to pay. And I'm not talking financial cost here. Oh, and these weapons were likely made before the events, as after, they would have lost the knowledge and the ability to make them. Now let's talk about the military side. At least one type of armor was made for training, rather than actual combat, as it offers little protection, but doesn't constrict, nor does it obscure vision. Well, it's best not to drill them too hard too quickly, as if you do that, the enemy won't need to kill them. Those that are drilling them will have done all their work for them. When young men joined the army, they vowed that they will fight to the death. In many cases, this promise is fulfilled all too quickly. Two different worlds, but with a key commonality. Loads of sacrificial animals to charge right into the abattoir, where government sends them in order to satisfy their beliefs. Sorry, I was just thinking about this. It's why I never considered a military career, among other reasons. Let's start with the lower ranks. Soldiers were commonly armed with axes, much like the Anglo-Saxons and similar warriors in real-life history. Men-at-arms and lightly armoured foot soldiers favoured round shields, as it allowed them to quickly cover their weapon-bearing arm, making their attacks less easy to predict. They could be used to protect against arrows, and deflect against blade attacks. They were also relatively light, making them easier to carry, and also to switch positions, in case the enemy considered outmaneuvering them, or at least trying to. Although some use larger shields that could be used in a formation that created a protective barrier against projectiles, and also against single combatants. In real-life history, this was a common tactic before the invention and wide use of breech-loading weapons and cannons, and before that, armoured cavalry tactics. Some shields were used in both rituals and combats. They're also known to be used as a tribute to fallen warriors by building a wall from them, on the order of army leaders. They certainly know how to honour their dead, don't they? Plate armour, most likely worn by those higher in rank, was countered with a horseman's pick, which penetrated the metal and picks the flesh clean off. Okay, maybe not that clean. It likely made the death about as slow and horrible as it possibly can, without being put in a torture chamber for a few days, as even if you could survive that, infections probably kill you after. Unless, of course, you had a flower of life or germicidal lotion, in which case there's a good chance that you might survive, if they're quick enough with it. But military supplies, being as they are, that might not be guaranteed. Army boots varied in quality, which depended on the rank of those in the army, with the higher ranks getting better boots, of course. Some used armour that wasn't made for tight formations, due to the spikes on it, but for rushing the enemy and stopping them in their tracks. Mostly because their comrades aren't into the S&M treatment. Yeah, they're not nobles. They're not that perverse. Light cavalry was known to wear padded leather to absorb the force of blows and soften the impact of blunt weapons. And the helmet that they wore had a visor that reflected light, which temporarily blinded opponents, as if it was a set of whitened teeth inside the mouth of an entertainer. That's an entertainer from our world, by the way. Officers carried military knives, but not as a primary weapon. It was likely a status symbol to separate them from the common soldier. Some in the army wielded the battle sword, which was an inferior weapon compared to what the church wielded, which had something to do with it being made from technological scraps. Yeah, it was made from junk. No wonder it was inferior to what the church could make, as they likely preserved more than everyone else. I mean, just look at the Dark Ages! Yeah, sorry. I seem to be a bit more knowledgeable about this than others. I get a bit worked up about this. Spears were the favourite weapon of the Defiance warriors, likely in defiance of the church, as it can crush armour and devastate electronic components of Nerajatan sentinels, never mind flesh. This is likely to be a pre-event weapon, at the point when those robotic warriors were seen outside the sanctuary. And yes, they were robotic. They could have used some of those in the Terminator movies. There are other weapons created to counter the armour of the Sentinels of NetMoverSitan. One of them was the Great Chainsword, which was huge, impractical, and deadly, much like an American muscle car. Some wore barbed wire handlers to allow grabbing NetMoverSitan Sentinels without risk of them injuring the wearer, due to them proving to be protective against cuts and punctures. They must have been made of something stronger than iron to cause damage to them. Those who wore them were either brave or idiotic to get that close to a metallic warrior whose purpose was to bring death to any that its masters ordered it to kill. There are even rare weapons with an electroconvulsive elimination system. Quite a mouthful, isn't it? That creates a high voltage discharge on contact to fight NetMoverSitan Sentinels' mechanical bodies. Nice they have a countermeasure, not so nice that it's rare. The Mortification was a spear that was created due to hundreds of years of technological development. Originally used to poke bodies on the battlefield. This spear was a set of mini saw blades on a metal pole. I think they'd definitely be dead after being poked by that. Wouldn't you? The southern tribes made use of black steel as well as the Empire, using it to create weapons that gave off a foul odor, or weapons that were venomous, which shows their ruthlessness and creativity. The Togurians, one of those at least affiliated with the Empire, were impressed by the latter, so they made a better version of it. Talk about cultural appropriation. Horns were attached to helmets to make the southern warriors look terrifying. The helmet was sometimes used to beat the enemy to the ground with. There are even some that can distort the voice of the wearer. I'd say that it would just make them look foolish. Unfortunately, I remember that I wear bunny mask, and that the southern warriors are terrifying in that because of the weapons they wield, and the fact that they're charging at you like an angry bull full of testosterone, and it's seeing your bright red sunburnt body, inviting him to gore you to death. My apologies if I scared you with that. Let's move on to something less scary. The most trustworthy messengers wore boots that helped them to deliver messages to the front line. Because let's face it, they have enough to worry about, such as assassins, enemy ranged units, the odd wild animal, without having to worry about blisters. Speaking of bulls, bull leaping was considered a noble yet dangerous entertainment, where acrobatic tricks were performed while jumping over bulls, charging at them at full speed, while wearing a light but flexible suit which allowed them to move without restrictions. And do that. It could make the difference between landing on your feet and having a horn up your backside. That is just one of the more civilian customs of the Empire, similar to bullfighting in Spain, at least before they banned it. The main difference is, the bulls didn't die. Pigskin gloves were commonly used by farmers, and bludgeons were used to settle agricultural disputes, as opposed to court cases that would require travelling for days, regardless of what method they had. So legal disputes would need to be dealt with at the place it was, rather than wait days, if not months, especially as there was planting, growing and harvesting seasons to think about. They can't work on food production if they're more focused on a drawn-out court case than doing actual farm work. I mean, it's not as if they can instantly summon a lawyer with some anime haircut. I'll stop now. Tugerian messengers were not well versed in royal customs. They didn't take their boots off before meeting the Emperor. This provoked him into introducing them to their customs in a less than subtle way by nailing their boots to their feet. I don't think that even the Japanese have done that, and they have similar customs with footwear upon entering the house. I mean, taking them off, not hammering nails to feet. Although, this did give some blacksmiths the idea for making spike boots. The main difference is the spikes are on the outside rather than the inside. Much less painful for the wearer. Tournaments were known to take place in the Empire, with some brave or foolish participants using black steel shields, although they typically wore a specific kind of armour for this event, much like gladiators during the Roman era. The criminal justice system is swift and unforgiving within the Empire, although it seems to vary greatly, depending on how high you are in the social order. That determines how likely it is to get away with your crimes, much like in real-life history. After the event, if you are found guilty of both tax fraud and attempting to bribe an official, the sentence for one convicted of that crime was life imprisonment, and worse crimes had the death penalty. Who said justice wasn't swift? That's about as much as I can find on the Empire. For now, at least. Next I'll go over the next faction, the Church of Nerajatan. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!